Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Lunar Alchemy. My name is John. With me here, of course, is Bella. This week, we are discussing the solar transit of the sun through gate 52. And we're going to be talking about the archetype of the mountain. The elements, of course, are mountain over mountain. Kind of an interesting one to consider if you, depending on your perspective from where you're seeing that. And this is kind of a personal one for me because it is the sole activated gate that I have in my root, connecting up to the sacral energy center. So here we are. Bella, are you feeling mountainous?
Yeah, I do. I was guiding an attunement or an exercise right before in our transit call. So everybody in the inner circle has access to that. And it's the same day as we are meeting here. So often I have done some kind of group sharing before. And it felt so safe, even if we were going into the shadow of stress, which is a collective shadow, which probably we're going to speak more about. It just felt so safe to sit in a circle and to go to the places of contraction and then allow, kind of be that mountain, that witness in just compassion and togetherness, to kind of see the geometry going from contraction into something lighter, a geometry that felt like balance. So really going from stress to balance and watch that. And it felt really good inside. For me, I often feel the 52 in relationship to my 25, because I think it's the numbers 2552. I don't have the 52 or the 58, the programming partner, but I feel it a lot in the contracted breathing of the 25 in that contraction. And then afterwards, it felt like my diaphragm and everything was just so much more relaxed. So a balancing, definitely. And I have several kind of new ways, it seems like, that I always want to add in, because we already spoke about the 52, I believe, last year. And, we do it in the transit call. So when we come here to the Lunar Alchemy, I love to bring in the elements and the colors and the planets more and more, just because I guess with the first gene key in my evolution, like to do the same over and over again, it kind of kills me, So also the fact that we have people here with the 52 in the activation sequence on the call and people active in the chat, that's what makes me show up. I'm like, why am I doing this year after year? No, it's because the liveness of it. So the mountain might look the same this year as it did last year, but there is a different quality of the liveness of who's climbing the mountain and, how the elements are kind of dancing on the mountain. So that feels kind of important to bring it in here.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting quality about mountains, of which I just did a quick little climb this past week over the solstice, up and down a mountain with very mystical qualities. And it's an incredibly vibrant and dynamic energy, despite the incredible anchoring that happens in its sort of creation and in its presence. Of course, this is one of those unusual gene keys that has this kind of the wording of the spectrum from shadow to city doesn't automatically make us jump towards these incredible qualities that is a potential of human beings. The shadow of stress, of course, we can all relate with this. The city of stillness. Oftentimes people think about peace when they think of stillness, and there's somewhat of a different quality with this one in terms of how transcendent it is. And then, of course, we have the gift of restraint, and many people think, whoa, what is this? How is restraint a gift? In fact, this 52 is in my culture sphere, and thinking about the gift of restraint in terms of culture, I have 52.4. It can be very, very easy to just think about like, oh, how am I supposed to engage with a culture that part of the way is restraining myself? That doesn't make any sense. So this particular gene key really brings to us a physical and visceral experience of the paradox that is available through every gene key, and really helps us take a look at what's going on there, and to gain a different perspective, which is really what mountains do. You climb up on the mountain, and what is most people after climbing a mountain? They want to see the world from a different angle. And that's really part of all of this. So in terms of that dynamic, Bella, from moving from one year to the next, and the transformations that happen with the mountain in particular, I wonder if this archetype has shifted for you in any way in terms of your perspective, or what you're feeling, your experience in relationship to it is.
Yeah, I feel it's sometimes difficult to know what shifted. Like it's kind of, I can just tune in here and now to what I feel. I am definitely feeling into the Venus part of this. We were speaking about, I think last week, how earth and mountain elements are the feminine. And in astrology, really what I do feel the Venus energy, and that energy of, taking it all in, the rain and the people and everything that happens on the mountain. It feels very receptive. And at the same time, I guess it has that Libra quality, which is one of the signs of Venus, that it actually is drawing people to interact, because you come there, like you say, to climb the mountain, you come there for another perspective. So somehow, if the Taurus energy is very much it's very, very much the feminine on the inside of the body, somehow here there is a kind of social aspect to it as well, where the mountain is also a meeting point in another way. So it feels more like an air energy, where Taurus is more like an earth energy.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about that for today's transmission. For those of you that are perhaps new to our discussion, it looks like there's a few people that at least I'm not as familiar with. So welcome to you. Each of our lunar alchemy discussions is followed by a quantum transmission of essentially a frequency template that we can then use to further our evolution, much in a way in which we experience over time through the process of contemplation or of self-reflection. And of course, here we have mountain over mountain. These are two stony earth elements. And yet, if I think about a mountain over a mountain, what is that? It's just a really, really high mountain, which of course reaches up into the upper atmosphere. And one of the qualities of this gene key and of our movement through it has to do with our breath. Of course, the shadow of stress. When does stress occur? When our breath moves out of the rhythm that has been established through the earth and nature. When we move out of harmony with that rhythm, we become stressed. So naturally, it kind of like leads us to think about, how are we breathing? What is going on in the air inside of us? So this is an interesting one to consider, just because of all of the different possibilities from the ways that we could look at this. We could look at climbing a mountain from the aerial perspective. We could look at climbing the mountain from this sort of earth receptive perspective. We can look at it from the perspective of, I mentioned the 9 and the mountaineer, the sort of masculine climbing to the top. And engaging in that way. So there's just so much happening in this one, especially as we begin to look at the expansion into the city, which Richard Rudd describes as a quality of energy that exists on either side of the spectrum. If we go all the way to the deepest end of stress and all the way to the highest frequency range of restraint, at some point we're going to hit the void, the nothingness. And that's where the city exists. We often have this idea of the shadow frequency being the lowest frequency, the gift frequency kind of being in the middle, and the city being just the highest frequencies. And we're always like, we all need to raise our frequencies. But in this particular gene key, it's revealed that the city exists at outside either end of the extremes of the spectrum. And so, Bella, I wonder if you have a perspective about extremes in this particular archetype, and can we move into an extreme of stress and find our way through to the other side? Jen asked me to explain that again. Jen, I'm assuming you're referring to the spectrum of the cities in relationship to the shadows and the gift. So let's see. Yes, the spectrum. Okay, wonderful. So when we look at the gene keys, they're organized within a spectrum of frequency. And we can see the shadow frequency and the gift frequency, as well as the Siddhic frequencies. When we look at our own personal experience, when we think about our shadows, we think of those shadow aspects of the parts of ourself that are not yet illuminated, the aspects of self which we experience as separate. This is one of the primary ways in which we project onto others, meaning there's a phrase that says, if you point at somebody, there's at least 3 fingers pointing right back at you. So if you want to blame somebody outside of yourself, oftentimes the source of the experience is happening within. This is what a shadow is, and it tends to be of lower frequency because it is not raised in our awareness. As we grow and evolve, the gift frequency begins to show its benefits in the world, both to ourselves and to others. And as we get more and more free of that separation between ourselves and the shadow, the more we discover the gift that that shadow provides. And that indicates a raising of our frequency. Now, let's say we continue on that path and we've gone to the extreme of the gift of restraint. The frequency continues to raise, and frequency is essentially a bump up and a bump down and back to a central line. So this is a sine wave. That's one movement within a frequency design. Now, as frequency increases, it doesn't get higher in nature or lower in nature. It repeats in a shorter and shorter span of time. So now you have the same frequency, a higher frequency, you're going to do a bunch more jumps in that period of time. Okay, so that's what we see as high frequency. Low frequency would be, it would take a really long time to get through the whole loop. Okay, so this is the difference between the shadows and the gifts. The Siddhic frequency lives outside of this measurement of repetition. There are no cycles in Siddhic frequencies, and therefore they exist beyond the extreme spectrum. If you follow a high frequency pathway, eventually there's going to be no space in between each loop. Likewise, if you follow the length of time for an extraordinarily slow frequency, it's going to flatten out into a straight line, and there's nothing there either. And that's what Richard is talking about when he's referring to the acidic frequency being outside the spectrum and transcendent of that frequency range. Let's see. Okay, wonderful. It looks like we got that clear. Thank you for that question, Jen. So Bella, at the extremes, let's first of all look at the extreme of stress, because I think that's a lot easier for me. That's a lot easier for me to understand than the high frequency extreme of restraint. And is there a breakthrough? What happens with this archetype? How does this archetype lead us into the breakthroughs in our development or into a new perspective when we hit that extreme low frequency?
I feel like I would like to go back to the nature of those archetypes and where we are in the wheel, because of course, yeah, stress can break us down. I can say that, but I feel like there is something interesting with going into like the nature of all these gates where we are. So, you know, you're speaking about extremes, and that's where we were just in the gate of extremes. And I often refer back to Ashley, who has the 15 in her radiance, and she speaks about the 15 as the nervous system. And here we see those, when we are looking at all the hexagrams that have mountain on the bottom, so the lower trigram, we have, it starts with the 15 and then the 52. And when I look at this, and most of these are Cancer gates, and some of them are Leo gates. I mean, when it comes to Cancer, it's like either you're nurtured or you're not. And stress is probably, like you say, I think all disease stem from stress in one way or another. When you're not nurtured, you're stressed. That's the very first thing. You're a baby, you're born from your mother's womb, you're nurtured or not. And it's very stressful if you aren't, and you can't even live if you aren't. And I think that's because we are here in the Cancer quality. I think that's the thing. As a human being, if you don't have that basic needs, you're going to be stressed. You're going to be in an extreme that has to do with survival. And I can see that in all these, you know, in all these archetypes, the wild woman, the monarch, they are, all of them can be quite extreme in their expression, like all of them, even when we come into more of the leadership gates here. So that's something that I go back to. I mean, I wouldn't, of course, all extreme states can pop us to another state, but for me, that's not really again, there's something with the shadow. It can be a portal, but what I felt like it's that the word contention. Like restraint is not a word I like. I don't like the word, but there's a word in Spanish, it's contención, which is like very feminine. We can contain it all, you know, like we can contain it all. And that's kind of what we say that the mountain does. It's so different from year to year, but it's there taking on all the rain and all the weather and all the climbers and everything that goes on from year to year, and the fires, like everything, it's containing it all. And that for me, I feel like the capacity for containing more is, you know, our capacity to meet stress. Of course, we can break down in stress and we can be tucked to the floor and, you know, like nothing is left of us. But really what I see as the shift here, which is the human pathway, it is to expand what we can contain without having it eat on us so that we are malnurtured or stressed.
Yeah, that makes me think of more of the human design verbiage around this particular one, which is concentration. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes we think of concentration as a mental activity, but that isn't the meaning here. The concentration is as in making more potent, gathering in more and holding it, containing it, generating a more potent mixture of all of the elements of which it is made from.
Yeah, and I think here, we are often speaking in terms of masculine and feminine, so that being able to contain, I believe that that's the feminine pole of this. And then when I look at the 52 from more a masculine pole, it's about the presence and the staying power. It's the masculine that can be present and stay even when it's extreme, and then the feminine is what it can hold even if it's extreme. So it's the quality of presence, and it's the quality of containment, if you want, or concentration. So that's what we find here in the 52.
Yeah, one of the things that's so interesting about what you're saying is these qualities of masculine and feminine working kind of hand in hand in different roles in terms of their relation to others. Presence, of course, being the city of the 20, one of the kind of friendly partners of this particular archetype. And when you look at that, look at these qualities together, there's that containment, which is sort of that holding, that nurturing, and the masculine quality of concentration, which is like how many parts of a certain thing can fit into a space. What is the concentration of energy? When you become an extraordinarily potent creator, the concentration of your creation energy has reached an extreme degree in your physical body, as well as permeating the other bodies of your spiritual self. And so when you take action, the concentration of all of that energy flows through the activities that you do. And this concentration has a specific point in our body, which interestingly, I discovered kind of around the process of climbing a mountain. I'm not the discoverer of it. I discovered my own personal relationship with it. And it has to do with the perineum, which is at the base of the pelvis between the sexual organs and the anus. And right in this space, there's actually a little hole in the bone structure where there's a soft spot, and that's what that place is. And Richard Rudd describes this place in relationship to this gene key, but there's also kind of a mystical energetic structure there, which some people experience through practices of yoga, qigong, and other energetic based physical practices, where we begin to become aware of where energy resides in our body and how we can use it. And what I had discovered is right there in that little space, there's like a pool, like a pool of energy. And when I think about it, it feels kind of two-dimensional, but the concentration of the energy is kind of beyond. It's not flat. There's tons of depth in it. And when you learn how to direct a full breath into your body, which happens when you fully relax and your body comes into harmony with the vibratory pattern of nature, then the breath, or the energy that comes from the breath, whether you call that prana or chi or life force or whatever, it goes down and it reaches that pool, and it increases the concentration of that pool. When you take action, you actually have the opportunity to consciously direct this energy that resides within you at that point into any action that you take. And what that point represents is the point of stillness within you. So you can be in a room on fire, there's emergencies going on around you, and because this energetic system is concentrated and anchored, there is no stress in your body, because stress doesn't come from outer circumstances. Stress comes from a lack of connection of this point within our body to the vibratory waves of nature. And when our breath moves out of harmony and it stops touching that place and our body loses relaxation and all of that, what happens is our brain starts to try to take over what's going on. And this process is like the opposite. I love the picture, Bella, of this archetype because it's this giant Buddha head in the 64 doors, this giant Buddha who's like playing the role of the mountain. It's that absolute inner stillness that comes from this deep anchoring and deep, deep resonance with the vibration of nature in the processes of the body. And it just turns the mind off, which is kind of an interesting byproduct of how our bodies work. So this is I don't know why today, Bella, I sometimes have thought about this, this archetype or this gene key as kind of being simple. And for some reason, it just today, it feels like there's a million different faces of it. And it's really interesting to look at it from all these different perspectives. So yeah, I'm wondering what other reflections you have about it and how it moves through us. How is it this collective energy? What's going on in our bodies as this transit is happening? Where's the movement happening?
Yeah, so what we see here in the integral human design, we see the whole channel. It's connecting between the root and the sacral. This is what we call format energy. And in the middle, we have often spoken about that pulse that is the individual pulse of mutation. And here it's actually a pulse, again, of the collective. And we could say it starts there, but it kind of even feel more that it starts in the 1858. But really, that's why I'm speaking about the collective nervous system, because it has to do with a pattern. Like the 515 is a pattern, and this is about our patterns. And I think a lot of it is that when we are outside our natural patterns, that's what stress is, right? That's when we have no stability. Whether that is a pattern that is too rigid or a pattern that is like too extreme or too chaotic, you could say. I think it can be interesting to look at, because when we have a channel, we have a theme. So here we have the theme of the 9 and the 52. And the 52, like I was saying, I see it a lot as that staying power. Even when there's a lot to contain, you contain it. Or even when there's a lot to kind of breathe in and be in presence with, you stay with it. That's the 52. However, if you don't have the 9, you don't have the whole process of the energy. Like this is a kind of fuel in itself, a staying power, but the life force and the energy that we have in the sacral, the 9 knows what details to focus on. And the 9 also kind of know, the sacral says, I have energy for that. I don't have energy for this. So when you don't have a 9, you can have this immense staying power, but you don't really know what are the details to focus on. Where do I really invest my energy? So I feel like there can be, when we speak about the format energies, there can also be a kind of depression, like the man that knows that he wants to focus on a family, but the family is not there. Like there is something where you're looking for the other side, and the 52 needs to find that's worth staying for. And I can see that in people with the 52, that when they don't have that, when they didn't find it, there is a restlessness in them, and they can be trying a lot of different things. And when we look at the root center, we have a lot of the keys of the codon ring of seeking. And actually the 15, which is in the G center, is also part of that codon ring of seeking. So it is the human that wants to find a purpose, that wants to find something that is worthy of putting our energy on and working for and putting our fuel into. So that's something that I see. And somehow I often see the whole channel, which is interesting. Like I feel like I often see the whole channel than just the hanging gate. But I feel that's important. And then knowing on the other side that it's connected to the 58. So of course, there is a lot of, the lower chakras here. And there's a lot of even survival. There is vitality. Like we are working with those lower chakras, those lower centers. And it becomes very, very important to be grounded in your body. And you see the stream of service or the collective circuitry, which is the normal word for it when we don't look at integral human design. You see, it's here to serve. It's here to serve the whole. So our erratic patterns and our stress, it's something that's actually, it's kind of contagious. So when you have a 52 that is out of balance, you can definitely feel it. I have a few people in my life with a 52, and same with a 58. It's strong, like we are speaking about the drive of evolution here, of course. And I can share one more thing that I like to share before we.
Yeah. I wanted to mention.
Do you want to come in first? Yeah,
just for a quick little mention, Deborah mentioned some of her hanging gates with 15 and the 52. I have both of those channels, 552 and the 952. And what's kind of interesting about those two is that you have the 52 is in the root, and it connects to the power of life in the 9, and then you have the is the 15 in the sacral, Bella? Again, I'm turned up. It's the 5, right?
The 5 in the sacral, the 15 is
5 in the sacral, and the 15 in the G. And there's this kind of like, I guess it looks like this to you guys. There's this relationship between these two. Here's the 952, here's the 515 going up to the G, where we just came out of the 15 and it's evolving into the 52. And there's this connection between those two channels. And because of the way that nature evolves, the connection between the 15 and the 52 is very, very strong. And it allows for, we were just coming out of all of these sort of heart-centered gates of, we were talking about love and all of these kind of processes in the last month or so before we got into these, when we were in the earth-based hexagrams, where we have this opportunity to express love into the world. And now we're bringing structure to it through rhythm, through staying power. And then we'll move into the 39 from here to elaborate on this process and to be able to give our evolutionary process as human beings a direction. And so you're saying, Deborah, you've got the 15 and the 52, seeking out the energies of the 9 and the 5, or at least being aware of how you are influenced by those who carry that, how you can receive conditioning in there, is going to allow you more of the process to build the structures in your life that you are seeking through this codon ring of seeking. And for that, I mean, it's such an interesting, it's just such an interesting quality of our personal progression into these. So please, Bella, yes, that was my tangent.
No, that's perfect. And Kelly is saying she has 9 and 5, so it can be the other side as well. And
yes,
and know that a process is always like, this is really the key that tells us about balancing, and that there are always two sides. So you are going to look for the experience of the other side, because you're here to be whole and you're here to experience that whole process. And when the gate is hanging, you do that in the interaction with the world. So yeah, in some way it can be more interesting to have a hanging gate than to have the whole channel. It's two different ways. So I wanted to share another way of looking at it that just is confirming everything that we're saying. So here we can see in the trigrams, again, we have mountain over mountain for the 52, and the geometry of the I Ching, it's also that we look at the inner trigram. So if we don't look at the top and the bottom, we look at the 2nd to the 5th, we see that there is a trigram here. This is the trigram of thunder. And then the same thing, if we don't look at the top one, we look here, we see this is the trigram of water and sun.
Water and thunder.
Yeah, exactly. So it's alive, like it is alive. It contains something. Like even if we say, oh, this is just mountain, no, it always contains more. And with the changing lines, like the way the I Ching is working, it's never isolated. So I think that's important. And here we see that the background is blue or purple, and then we have this being that is containing it all, or that has a staying power to sit there. And I kind of like also this, it's almost like somehow the mountain here is flat, but like this is what's on the surface, but then it has this grounding is what I feel. And also with the verb here, like quieting. So it's not that the mountain is quiet. It's not that the human is quiet. It's not that life is quiet, but there's a quieting when we come in and we contain, we concentrate. So I also feel like that's an important word. And then the other word is balancing. And then let's see if there's anything more. Yeah, I think this is actually confirming what we were speaking about before, because we have the Venus energy here, but we have the Saturn. So it's kind of that the masculine that's stable and sits and is there present. And then here we have the Venus that contains. So that felt like it's also confirming. And then what it says is to balance, to reach the point of equilibrium. So we do that, and it might feel like it's a lot to contain or a lot to stay present with, but it's that balancing. And then it's actually about forging or meeting the meeting of the soul and the personality, which in a way, that's the whole point with human design. Like, why are we looking at the point of birth as one point, which gives us all the black activation, and then 3 months before, which is the soul activation? And the whole point is to find the dance, the equilibrium, the balancing, the communication, even if it might not be a conscious communication, but by tuning into our striding authority, coming back to our bodies, coming back to our inner authority, we are going to have that forging or that meeting of the soul and the personality in the world. So I feel that this is just another way of looking at it, and it really just confirms everything that we said so far without looking at this way of explaining it.
Yeah, balance is one of those words that I feel like gets thrown around so much in today's kind of exploration of personal development. And what does that really mean? If you really get deeply into what does it mean to be balanced? Does it mean you're spending the same amount of time on your work and your personal life? Like, what does balance really mean? And it brings us with this gene key deep into our body. And the balance has nothing to do with how we use our activity. The balance has to do with our relationship to our personal individual nature, and with that relationship to the greater nature. And I love seeing people are chiming in with the different words that they like to use for this: ballast, equilibrium. These are beautiful words to hone into. And okay, fantastic. I love the words. Do you feel an equilibrium between that source point, that rooted point in your perineum, and this core of planet Earth? That's the question, regardless of where is the mental activity going to take us. And yes, I love that. Core stability, exactly. Where is our stability? How anchored do we feel? How stable do we feel? And for those of you who are carrying an open or an undefined root, this is a powerful theme, because there's so much happening energetically in your experience that may cause you to feel the opposite of being anchored and stable. And so how do we understand the important role that we have in our families, in our communities, in the collective, when we have that going on, when we start to consider, oh, I want to feel more balance in my life, or whatever the word happens to be. But I think what's awesome about looking at this particular gene key, this archetype, the ideas that we may have about the Buddha, it's that we can discover our anchor regardless of our energetic makeup, regardless of our environmental experience, and regardless of the activities that we choose to do or do not do. And when we come into that deep resonance of anchoring inside ourselves, then all of our activities just naturally flow forth from that place of stillness, regardless of whether or not we're defined or open or whatever. Doesn't even matter. The structure will arrive, of course, in different ways for us because we're individuals, but it will flow through us. And that's one of the magics of climbing mountains, is that we have to find our own deepest rhythm that we can access to get to the top of that mountain, to be with the mountain as the weather rolls in, and as the climate changes, as the oxygen reduces, and all of the sort of extremes that we begin to experience on a mountaintop. I mean, I'm kind of blown away by this discussion, Bella, because it just feels like there's so much more power available in the possibility of exploring this contemplation than I remember there being last year talking about stress. Because last year we did only shadows, and here it's much expanded. So I'm really grateful, Bella, for your anchoring into that evolutionary pulse to do something new, to explore something more expansive. Any other thoughts, Bella, before we maybe move into our transmission today?
I'm wondering, maybe we want to do something in Inner Circle, like we had been speaking about open houses, and have the full moon or the new moon transmission. And it is soon as a new moon, because I feel like there is something that we are stirring up, in this conversation. We are opening ways of feeling and seeing the archetypes, and then to actually be able to tune in to the transmission afterwards. It's more powerful than then kind of just going to the academy once it's uploaded and all that and maybe get it. So I feel like I would like to find a way of, not regularly, but at least have a few possibilities for the Inner Circle and people that are on our list to join for a transmission that comes right after a conversation. So that's what my longing, I guess, as I'm sitting here.
Wonderful. I feel, for whatever reason it is, that I feel that there's a possibility here for creating something that is more along these lines. I had a very personal, sometimes when I go up on the mountains, for those of you that are familiar with some of the work that I do, sometimes I get these wild mystical downloads that happen when I go on the mountain. And that's pretty much been the primary focus of what I have been capable of receiving from going up on these mountaintops and doing these journeys. And for me, this particular journey was immensely personal. And the discovery of delivering a particular transmission of energy into greater groups of people is something that has arrived for me. So for those of you who have received energy work before, whether it's Reiki or other forms of maybe theta healing or forms of processing that happens through a transmission type of experience, these particular transmissions are frequency coded for the elements of our body within the 4 elements that we see expressed in the hexagrams, and earth, air, water, and fire. And for that reason, the potential that the frequency has to shift and attune and readjust and redirect the energies that we have been containing into something that is purely resonant with our inner essence or the essence of nature is a quantum potential. So for those who have experienced these, it's often not every single one that transforms a huge aspect of your experience, but for many people, often there is at least one that they come across that will absolutely transform an aspect of your experience of the world and your experience of yourself. And I'm beginning to feel that that's just too valuable to not make a bigger impact with it. So, not to get too off topic, today's transmission will be an earth core connection. It is about anchoring our physical body, our emotional body, our mental body, and our spiritual bodies to that point of stillness that I described that resides just at the base of the pelvis. So if you desire to explore this more deeply, all you need to do is sit and breathe and discover the relaxation that allows your breath to reach that deepest point at the base of your pelvis. And if you do that, you will find a complete shift of the vibration happening in your body, where mental activity dulls to a very quiet or absent level. And you will also discover a complete lack of stress in your physical body. So, I guess with that, we will look forward to seeing you next time with the 39 and whatever we come up with for the new moons, full moons, what is going to be coming. Yes, pelvic breathing. So thank you all for joining us. It was wonderful to have so many of you, and some of you that I am less familiar with, haven't seen before. Really appreciate you joining our discussion today. Your presence and energy contribute immeasurably to the quality of our discussion together here, and I appreciate your questions and comments as we go. And with that, I am sending loving presence from my heart to each of yours, and we'll look forward to seeing you in a future discussion, and hopefully very soon another transmission. So bye-bye for now.